Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about the for loop. This is the alternate structure in Python to the while loop. Basically, a while loop, as you recall from yesterday, depended on a counter of some kind. And basically, you gave it a variable starting off at 0 and counting your way up for as long as the counter was less than a number. The loop would continue to run, and then we incremented the counter so that each time the counter increased by 1 until we got to the point where the counter was equal to or greater than the number that we had set as a limit. At that point, then the while loop stopped. You can also do that with a Boolean. We can say, while this is true, do something, and then at some point we'll set that condition to false, and when it becomes false, then it will stop doing whatever it's doing. But in this case, a for loop is a little different. Basically what we're doing is we're setting up a loop to run through a collection. In this case, we're going to use a list. Essentially what we have is a list of, we're going to build a list of fruit, and then we're going to set it up so that we can iterate or move through that list of fruit. And once we do that, then we'll perform an operation on the fruit, and we will move on to the next fruit until we use up all the fruit in our collection. At that point, then we are done and our loop will stop. So that's the difference. A while loop uses some kind of a counter, and a for loop uses a collection, and it just goes through the items in that collection. So let's go ahead and begin by creating our collection. We're going to say, oops, I guess we need to move on to our desktop first. Let's try that. All right, so here we are on the desktop, and what we're going to do now is we're going to create our collection. I've already gotten us into our Python++, saved it as exercise 13. Let's go ahead and set this up to go to our Python code folder. Make sure that 13 is in there, and it is. All right, so what we want to do now is we're going to create a collection of fruit. And so we're going to call it fruits equal to, and we're going to put this inside square brackets, apples. And we comma delimit each one. Separate by a comma. Oops. And then finally cherries. Don't need a one at the end. We just end it there. So that is a collection. It's basically a list is a collection of items. You can put anything in here: numbers, letters, strings, booleans, objects, programming objects, other variables, other collections. Essentially what this does is it holds more than one thing, and then we can refer to those things by the index place that they are. So apples would be 0, bananas would be number 1, cherries number 2, and so on. So if we wanted to work with an individual item inside the list, then we would refer to it by its index number. All right, so right now we're going to work with all the items, though. We're going to loop through them one at a time, and we're going to print them. We need to create a variable to hold each individual item temporarily. So we're going to say for x is just a variable that's going to hold each of those 3 items individually while we do something to it. And we're going to use the keyword in to designate which collection that it's in, and then a colon, just like we did with the if statement, just like we did with the while loop. We have to end it with a colon, our conditional, and then we have to indent the lines of code that go in the box. And what we're going to do is print our name for our object. Then we're going to, just like we did yesterday, we're going to designate when the program ends, so that you'll know that Python essentially does whatever it does in the loop, and then it moves on to the next line of code until it finally finishes. So essentially what we have here is for x and fruits, for each item in this collection, we're going to print it, and then we're going to go to the next thing. And we don't have to have an iteration. We don't have to say x plus equals 1 or anything like that, because it's going to go through the 3 items within the fruit. We don't have to worry about infinite loops so much with the for loop, because you're never going to have an infinitely big collection. So you don't have to worry about infinite loops. There's always going to be a designated number of items inside the list, and then once you've gone through all the items in the list, you're done. So let's go ahead and save it. And let's go ahead and run it. And sure enough, it printed apples, bananas, and cherries, and then once the loop was over, the program end statement ran. So we looped through each of the items here, we printed them, and then we moved on to the next and the next until we ran out of items, and then we moved on from the loop into our code, to the program code, and that's what we did. And so basically that's what we got. Now, there are some other things that we can do. You notice all we've ever done in these loops so far is just print the name of the item or whatever, or print the number of the item. But let's say we wanted to do some other operations. It's a little more complicated than you would think. So let's go and add another step in here. Before we print it, let's do something like capitalize it or something like that. So first of all, we have to create another variable. We can't just use fruit sub x as the variable, because basically, and we can't just use x because this is an index number. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable here that we can perform operations on. So we're going to call this variable uppercase. It doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it anything you want to, but we're going to set it to empty. So we've created a variable. This is just a regular variable in Python. We can put anything we want to in there. All right, so what we're going to do now is for the items in our collection up here, we're going to capitalize them. The way that we do that, we still have to indent because this is all part of the same code block. And we're going to add that, and then we're going to print it. So essentially what it should do is it should add the item as that, and it should print it out in uppercase. And then once we get there, we're going to end the program just like we've done. So let's see what happens when we do this. All right, and weirdly enough, nothing happened. Let's go back and examine our code here. We should not print the X, which is the items. We need to print the uppercased items, and that's what happens. So let's make it print uppercase. There we go. Let's try that again now. Well, that's weird. Let's examine our results here. We got apples in uppercase, but then we got apples, bananas in uppercase. Then we got apples, bananas, and cherries in uppercase. Then our loop ended, and our program ends line of code ran. Why would it do this weird thing here? Well, because we did not clear out this uppercase variable between runs. So it was still holding apples when it shoved bananas in there. So basically it just stuck it on the end. So now there's a couple of things we can try. Basically right now what we're doing is we're just experimenting. So let's do this. Let's get rid of that plus equals sign. And let's see if it runs any different. And it did. That's what we needed to do. We were basically adding all of these things into one variable. We were concatenating them, and that's not what we wanted to do. But we did get it to run apples, bananas, and cherries just like we wanted it to. So that was a strange little side exercise, but it's important to know. So essentially what we did was we have to create a variable to hold the things that we've operated on. We couldn't just do print x dot upper. It doesn't work like that. Or at least I don't think it does. That's the thing. Let's do some experimenting here. Let's comment this line out. So that line's no longer going to run. And we're going to change this to this, and let's see if we can make the program run the same way. Save it. We're going to run it. And sure enough, hey, that actually works. So what we just did, now here's the thing. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. What we did was we removed a line of code. We have made our program run with less lines of code, and that is a very important skill to learn, which is kind of why I demonstrated this. Anytime you can figure out a new way to run a program with less lines of code, that's a very good thing, because every line of code is more bits and bytes that your computer has to have room for, and that your RAM has to make up for when it's running this code in memory. So anytime you can optimize your code by removing lines and still have it do the job that it's supposed to do, that's a good thing. We want to make sure our code is absolutely the smallest possible code that it can be. All right, so that's essentially how a for loop works. Now, and we've already actually looked at this earlier, but we're going to run it again just for fun. Okay, so we've discovered that a string of text in Python is just a collection of letters, a collection of characters. So we're going to go for X and let's say banana. We're going to print X. So we're just going to print the letters from the word banana. We're going to do our little thing here. Oops. All right. So it should print the word banana up and down instead of side to side. Let's see if that works. And sure enough, it does. So anything that's a collection, we can use a for loop. We can get out of a for loop, and essentially that's the limiter for a for loop, is the end of the string. As we learned with the while loop, we can also use the word break. We can use break and continue. So let's go back to our original fruit. And let's print X. But if X happens to be the word bananas, then we're going to break, which means we're going to end our loop. And then once the loop ends, we're going to go back and print our ending statement there. All right, so let's set that. Oop, I missed one. Unterminated. Ooh, dear. Neglected to terminate. Let's go back and look. All right, fruits equals apple. There it is. I missed a double quote. My bad. Let's run that again. Attention to detail. All right, you'll notice we printed the first one, and it checked the if statement, and that was not equal to banana. So it went back and looped again, and it printed the second one. That's equal to banana. And so when we hit that, we checked our if statement. If banana is equal to banana, and it was, then we break the program. We finish out the loop at that point. We don't go on and finish out cherries. We end the loop, and we go on to our next line of code, which in this case is the program ends statement. So essentially we can do the same thing with a for loop as far as continue and if that we could do. Now, we can also treat a for loop kind of like a while loop. We can actually use a counter. I'm going to do for x, and we're going to use the keyword range. And basically what we're going to do is print x. We're going to do our little program ends thing here. Now, using range, all we're doing is saying in the range of 0 to 6, we're going to print x, and when we get past 6, we'll be out of range. Program will end. Oops. And we do have to put a colon at the end of range. Attention to detail, guys. That is the key to programming. You'd think I would cut those out, but actually I want you to see how often those little weird things happen. All right, so as computers do, it started counting at 0. It counted 1, it counted 2, it counted 3, 4, 5, and when it hits 6, it goes to the place, but not, it goes up to it, but it doesn't include it in this case. There are 6 items within the range. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items, and so it did not, when we got to 6, this 6 doesn't mean the number 6. What it means is how many items are in the range that it wants to work with. So since we started out with 0, we only got to 5. And then once the loop was over, we went on to our next line of code, which in this case is the program ends. We can also add another parameter here. If we just want to print out certain items in a collection of some kind, we can go from 2 to 6. So if we do this, now it's not going to print out the whole range. It's just going to print out from 2. It will start where we told it to start, which we told it to start at the second item, 0, 1. So it starts after the second item. It starts on the, it skips the first 2 items since we have 2 as our starting place. So it goes past those 2, 0 and 1, and it starts at 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it goes up 2, but it does not include 6. So that basically will give us 4 items. If we take the total number of the items and total number of items in the range, which is 6, and we subtract 2, that gives us 4. 2, 3, 4. It printed 4 items. And then once again, when it got done, it printed the end of the deal. We can also we can add an incrementing. Let's see. Let me just demonstrate this. We can add an increment value on the end of this. So now I'm going to print from 2 to 30. So it's going to start printing at 2. It's going to skip 0 and 1. It's going to go to the values 30, but we're going to go by, let's say, by 3s. So it's going to count by 3s. It's going to start at the second place. It's going to skip the 3s. This is where things get a little complicated, but I did want to demonstrate the possibility. And so it skipped the first 2, and then plus 3 is 5, plus 3 is 8, plus 3 is 11, 14, 17, 18, 19. It got all the way to 29, but it did not go on to 30 or past that. So it ends, and then our ending statement ran after we finished our loop. So essentially, that is another thing that you can do with the range keyword in a for loop. We can use the else. Use the else keyword just like we can in an if statement or a while loop. Let's go ahead and give an example of that. So we're going to say for x in range 6 again. This is an easy way to set it up. Print x, so we're just going to print the numbers in the range. However, gets to the end, we're going to give it something else to do. So now when we run it, So it printed out, and then it printed finally finished. When it got to the end of the loop, it reached through that. It checked the first time, it printed X. It did it the next time, it printed X. Went all the way through the range, and then since this was out of range, the next time it came through, it did the else statement, which finally finished. So this is an example of when we might use the else keyword. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing, and hopefully that it was helpful. All right, guys, so that is the for loop. It's a little different from the while loop, but essentially does the same thing. What it does is it automates tasks within a program. You can work through a really large range or a really large collection using the loop process, and you can perform a lot of different activities or a lot of different tasks on a collection or on a range of items. And then once you've done that, then the loop will stop and your program will continue on. So go ahead, finish the exercise below, use the start assignment button above to turn in your Python files, and I'll see you in class. If you have any questions, remember, use the Canvas inbox and I can be reached.